Hi guys, and welcome back to the Watch Scientist channel. Today we have a little bit of a different video because I have started quite an ambitious project. I bought a pocket watch from 1840 and this is actually a repeater watch, as you can see here, although one of them seems to be a little stuck, but I think that should be fixable as well. What I'm very happy about is that, as you can see here, the balance is moving freely. When I start to take a watch apart, I try to assess it a little bit, look at both sides and each component to see what works and where I maybe need to pay a little closer attention to when I'm disassembling the watch. So here under the dial is where all the components are that are responsible for the repeater mechanism. And you can see here that this is a beautiful mechanism with many components and springs, and this is actually a quarter repeater. And this means that if you tell the watch to chime the time, then it will actually chime you the hours and the quarters of the hour. So let's say it's 2:50, then the watch will chime twice for the hour and 3 times so that you know that you are past 45. And I am just amazed by how beautiful this looks on this watch and how complex it is. I actually bought this watch for 120 euros, which is, in my opinion, quite cheap for something like this. Of course, it was not really working, but that is the fun of the project. And of course, I will not start the disassembly on the side of the repeater, but I will start on the side of the regular watch mechanism. And I've obviously taken off the hands as well as the gongs before starting this. So we begin with the balance, as this is the most fragile part of the watch, and I always like to have that out of the way first. It is a little bit stuck in here, but it comes out with a little wiggle, and I was kind of surprised by the escapement. More on that later. So now I am disassembling the bridges of the gear train, and as a next step I want to release the barrel, and for that I unscrew the click spring here. You always have to pay close attention when you are disassembling things that are under tension, like this click spring that is held under tension by the spring. Always make sure that you don't break these fragile parts. And as you can see here, maybe if you know a little something about pocket watches, then this is a key wound pocket watch and also a key set pocket watch. So you need a specific key that fits onto these square screw heads to wind and set the watch. And this also shows that this watch is quite old, as the normal keyless works that we are now used to seeing in watches was actually only developed in 1847 by Lecoultre. And I was quite surprised with the escapement here. I didn't really think about it. I was just expecting a classic Swiss lever escapement. But what you actually see here is an escape wheel that doesn't have the usual pallet fork, and this is a barrel escapement. So it doesn't really need that intermediate part, that intermediate jeweled part, which makes newer watches far more precise and need less servicing. So the repeater mechanism is actually not powered by the mainspring barrel, but it is powered with a separate spring that is shortly wound up when you are pressing the button of your minute repeater, and the energy you put into the press of the button is actually stored in this little spring, and this energy is used to chime the hours and the quarters. And so always when you're working with something that is maybe under tension or spring loaded, make sure that you safely remove it by giving it a little bit of support with, for example, this pegwood stick. And just as I expected, there was a little tension in it, and when I released the pressure from the bridge slowly in increments, you can actually see the hammers working. And this was quite a nice surprise, as it seems that most parts of the repeater seem to be working, at least in some way. And then I continued to disassemble the bridge and take apart the different wheels that are in this train of wheels. And I'm not yet sure how these wheels control the release of energy from the spring to make it slower and last longer, but that is just the process of disassembling these parts, especially for me as someone who didn't really learn this. I'm just doing this as a hobby, and I always try to look at the parts and how they work together to find out kind of how they lead to the functioning of the watch. And now we proceed to the most interesting part, which is the repeater mechanism. And here I want to be very careful, because you can see that there's numerous amounts of these steel springs scattered across the mechanism to put tension on certain parts, and you want to be very careful when disassembling these. I mean, in the worst case, you could maybe replicate these with a file and a lot of time, but that's not really my goal here. I want to keep everything working as it is. I would be very happy if this project would turn into a working repeater, and honestly that sounds kind of like a dream, to own a repeater watch. And I will do a video on how a quarter repeater works, because I think disassembling this watch and looking at each individual part is far easier to understand for the viewer when compared to the videos you mostly see of assembled watches. There's just a little too much going on. Unfortunately, I was not able to fully release the center bridge and the center wheel, as they are connected through a cannon pinion that I would have to remove with a hammer, which I'm not really comfortable with yet. So I will leave it on and have it removed by a watchmaker in the next weeks. And I continue to disassemble the pieces. And here you can also see the spring that is loaded with tension when you press the button of the repeater when you want your watch to repeat the time. And I continue just removing these springs and the rest of the mechanism, and the disassembly comes to an end here. And lastly, I remove the hammers as well as the substructure below the center bridge that holds the arbor of the spring that you wind up when pressing the button. And here I am left with a lot of different parts. This is definitely the most complicated watch I've ever disassembled, and am planning to reassemble as well. Hopefully that will work. And I don't know, it would be really cool to have this as a working mechanism. It has a diameter of 36 millimeters, which is quite small for pocket watches, and I would love to transform this into a wristwatch. But like I said, this is just a project, and it would be cool to just wear this watch once a month, and to walk around with a repeater on your wrist. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I will definitely be posting the assembly part. It will just take a lot of time, and I will also post a video on how a repeater works. So thank you guys so much for watching. See you in the next video. Ciao.